Do you remember what it was like to solve a problem without a search bar? No blogs, no GPS, and maybe the local phone box for private long-distance, quote-unquote, engagement. It was an era where being home when the street lights came on was the rule. Our social network was the street. A friend's face reaction was our like or dislike tag. And that was more than just freedom. Now we see it as the training ground for the strong, independent internal authority that the Gen X uses today. In this episode, we're looking into the mirror of Generation X. We will discover how an upbringing of nettle stings, dock leaves, and no internet gives birth to the 3 archetypes of the X-Men. Generation X grew up at a unique turning point in history. They were raised in the gap between the physical and the digital world. Analog life, then digital life, combined with analog. Their social networks were built on streets, and independence was a daily standard. This environment, this upbringing, forced a resilience on personal judgment rather than external data, making them the architects of a world they had to figure out for themselves. This generation was the last of its kind to navigate their early years without a global search function in their pocket. When they hit a dead end, there was no digital manual. They had to solve the problem with whatever was in front of them right then and there. This constant repetition of trial and error built deep instinctive resourcefulness. They are the original problem solvers who get results without needing a tutorial or an audience. In the USA, they have this term, maybe in the UK as well, latchkey kids. I don't know what the UK equivalent of that would be. But growing up with this lower supervision meant managing their own time, their own risks from an early age, and their own social hierarchies. Longitudinal latchkey studies have since shown that this early autonomy built a specific type of workplace resilience. They learned how to command their own space before they were even out of primary school, creating a level of self-contained capability that now defines their leaderships today. Gen X is said to be the generation born generally between the years of 1965 and 1980. Sort of defining their teenage years, pre-internet and post-boom. The Pew Research Center chose 1965 because it marks the definitive end of the boom. Birth rates dropped significantly, and the cultural focus shifted away from the family unit towards more of, again, this latchkey independence. And then why 1980? Well, it's usually cited as the start of the millennials, Generation Y. People born after this era had some form of home computing, the sort of start of the digital revolution time. The Generation X is defined as this point, which we're going to call the analog era, pre-digital. Writer Mark Prensky came up with this term, the digital immigrants, because Gen X lived through the birth of the internet as adults, after spending their youth in an analog, physical world. So Gen X became the only truly bilingual people in tech. They engineered the platforms the world now uses because they were only ones who understand how to translate human analog needs into digital solutions. Self-reliance. I mean, early life meant that if your bike broke, you fixed it yourself. This hands-on intuition runs the world's most successful companies today. This is our first archetype of Gen X, the practical maker. This is a leader who focuses on how things actually work. They don't wait for permission, they act with precision because they know the why behind the how. It was a form of no warranty upbringing. It's like growing up in the 70s and the 80s, things weren't disposable. If your rally grifter had a puncture or your cassette deck chewed a tape, you didn't bin it. You got the puncher kit out or used a pencil to wind the tape deck back in. This wasn't a chore though, this was a lesson in cause and effect. Because there was no like genius bar, search bar or instant replacement. You had to learn how to reverse engineer, to fix something, to work with what you had. So it developed a high degree of spatial and logical intelligence. The ability to look at a complex problem, break it into its component parts, and find the point of failure, deal with it, fix it, and learn. This is the practical maker. Our next archetype, I like the name of. It's about being in the moment with our achievements for those immediately around us. The name is the Grounded Presentist. So before status updates and achievements, they were private, right? And Gen X learned to find satisfaction in the doing now rather than the showing or posting later. And this creates the Grounded Presentist. In a world of digital noise, they remain anchored in reality, focusing on real-world impact and the strength of tangible results. So like in the 80s, you maybe landed a kickflip or aced an exam and there was no live stream to verify it, and it wasn't the goal. Literally no concept of that. So the need to post success or even have the goal of posting to verify and validate just didn't exist. So for the Gen X today, who may like to post, who may like to share, do it as an afterthought. Because there was no forethought that I'm doing this to post or doing this to share. Growing up, they learned the value and the reward that comes from just doing. The idea of cooking a meal and taking a photograph is absurd to some people, Gen X. And for those that do like to do that, it's just a fun afterthought. It was never the goal. The bridge. Our third archetype, we've touched on this before. This is a Gen X that lived through the birth of the internet as adults. The digital immigrants. Bilingual in tech, engineering the platforms. Upbringing was truly analog and now merged with digital. We will never see that combination again. This is special and unique to Generation X. And now this does not come without struggle. The typical is the mobile phone at dinner table, for example. You know, this huge switch over and rolling with it, just adding more to that analog resilience. And it extends beyond the typical, the older generation saying, oh, music's not like it was today and stuff. You know, the typical things that we get from generation to generation. No, this Generation X is truly special in that there was a massive social shift in communications. In that upbringing, media was so much more different. In the UK, we would have something called the watershed. This is where true crime was allowed on television, for example, you know, maybe after 10 o'clock. That the next generation, the millennialists, understood straight away that the feed is giving us what we want, whereas the Generation X had to come to the realization of this later on and often get tricked by it. World changed to pull media, as Generation X could often think that is still push media. Until we learn, okay, this feed is a reflection of me. This feed is my mirror. More changes that we had to roll with as we learned this new world. And so with these changes, the skills of the bridge, the maker, and the presentist are the direct outcomes of a specific moment in time. They are the tools that help us navigate these challenges that, ironically, this generation created. Because they were raised to be independent, they became the people who get the job done every single day. It is the undeniable power of a generation that leads through action, because that's exactly how they were built. Different.